Welcome back to the MHS channel. First, I'm very curious to know where you're watching from and at what time. Feel free to share in the comments below. Also, if you have any feedback or suggestions for how the channel can improve, don't hesitate to leave a comment.
I'm Frank. It all started on a weekend trip to visit my mother in Ohio. I was driving the 1989 Buick my father left me before he passed away last year. It was an old car with a host of minor problems, but I couldn't bring myself to sell it. I was used to estimating the remaining gas based on feel and distance traveled, but that afternoon I made a mistake. The sky turned a dark gray as I turned onto a small road cutting through rural Kentucky. It was getting dark, and I still had about 2 hours left to reach my mom's house. The gas gauge showed a quarter tank left, but when the car started sputtering, I knew I'd miscalculated. No, I mumbled, as the Buick coughed and died in the middle of the deserted road. I coasted to the shoulder, trying to restart it several times, but it was no use. I looked around. No gas station, no convenience store, not even a single car passing by. Just vast fields under the pale sunset light. I pulled out my phone and sighed. No signal. Of course. Maybe this is why I usually avoided back roads, but the GPS had shown this as the best shortcut, and I hadn't thought it through. The sun was sinking below the horizon, and I knew I didn't want to be stranded here when night fell completely. In the distance, I saw a faint light from a house, maybe half a mile away, set back off a small dirt path. It was the only sign of life in this desolate area. I hesitated for a moment before deciding to walk there. Maybe the owner would let me borrow a phone or spare some gas to get back to the nearest town. As I got closer to the house, I started realizing it wasn't what I thought. It was an old farmhouse-style house with a wide porch and faded paint. Everything looked a bit neglected. Tall grass, a cracked window patched with tape, and the porch cluttered with old items. But there were lights on, meaning someone was there. As I stepped onto the porch, I heard a strange sound coming from the side of the house, a sound like weak moans and anxious, heavy breathing. I stopped, feeling a chill run down my spine. I was considering what to do when the door swung open. I flinched, taking a step back. A tall, thin man stood in the doorway. He looked to be in his late 40s, with messy brown hair and deep-set, tired eyes. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice low and hoarse. The way he stood blocking the door, as if he didn't want me looking inside. "Sorry to bother you. My car ran out of gas down the road. I was wondering if I could borrow your phone, or maybe spare a little gas if you have any." The man studied me intently, his eyes sizing me up from head to toe. Something wasn't right about his gaze. It was too tense and wary. "I don't have spare gas. Phone line's been down since the storm last week. Cell service doesn't reach out here either." Before I knew how to react to the man's refusal, the strange noise suddenly came again from the side of the house, sounding like pained moans and muffled sounds. Seeing this, the man immediately shifted his stance, clearly trying to distract me. "What's that noise?" I asked, unable to suppress my curiosity. His face tightened for a moment, before relaxing into a forced smile. "Ah, that's my old dog. Hurt his leg, and I've got him penned up on the back porch so he doesn't hurt himself more. Just gave him some pain medicine." The explanation sounded plausible, but the sound didn't resemble a dog, but I wasn't sure anymore. "How far is the nearest town?" I asked. "Graysville is about 10 miles in the direction you were heading. There's a gas station there." I thanked him and turned away, with some curiosity, trying to glance inside the house again, but saw nothing clearly. I took a few steps down the path, then stopped, pretending to check my phone. In the corner of my eye, I saw he was still standing there, watching. Instead of going back to the car, I quietly circled around to the side of the house where I had heard the strange sound. It was almost completely dark now. I moved very quietly, trying not to make any noise. There was a small ground floor window, partly obscured by wild bushes. As I got closer, the sound became clearer. It wasn't a dog. It was a human voice, a woman's voice, weak and terrified. Help! Help! I stood frozen, unable to believe my ears. I moved closer to the window. All I could see was a dark room with dim light. "Is anyone there?" I whispered, loud enough for someone inside to hear. "Please," the voice replied, so weak I could barely hear it. "Help me. He'll be back." I tried to open the window, but it was locked tight. For a split second, I saw a face pressed against the glass, a woman with wide, terrified eyes and bloody lips. Before I could say anything more, the window slammed shut and the curtain was pulled down from inside. I heard noises from inside the house like someone moving quickly. I hurried back to the road, heart racing, trying not to look back. What should I do? I had no way to contact the police. I was stuck in the middle of nowhere with a potentially dangerous man and a woman needing help. I needed to find cell signal. I climbed onto the roof of my car and held my phone up high. One weak bar of signal appeared. Just one bar, but maybe enough to call 911. I dialed the number with trembling fingers. The dispatcher's choppy voice came through after a few beeps. "I need to report an emergency," I said quickly, afraid the call might drop at any moment. "I think someone is being held hostage at a farmhouse on State Route 8, about 10 miles from Graysville." I heard cries for help and saw an injured woman. I continued describing as many details as possible: the house's appearance, the man, what I had heard and seen. Just as I finished, the call dropped. I tried calling back, but there was no signal anymore. What now? I couldn't go back to that house, but I couldn't just abandon that woman either. I decided to walk along the road, hoping to find a passing car or another house. After about 20 minutes, I saw headlights in the distance. I stood in the middle of the road, waving my arms like crazy. The vehicle slowed down. It was a large SUV. The driver was an elderly man. I borrowed his phone and called 911 again, confirming they had received my first call and were sending officers. Then, he kindly waited with me. About 15 minutes later, 2 police cars appeared with flashing lights but no sirens. I quickly explained the situation to the officers, and they asked me to stay by my car while they investigated the house. About 20 minutes passed in tense silence. Then, an officer returned to my car. "You were right to call us," the officer said, his expression grave. "We arrested the man inside the house and rescued the woman. She's being taken to the hospital for treatment." "Is she okay?" I asked, still trembling. "She's injured, but will be okay. It's unbelievable we found her. Emily Morton, a teacher from Louisville. Her family reported her missing 6 months ago." I felt a coldness run down my spine. 6 months? She was there for 6 months? The officer nodded, his eyes flashing with anger. "The suspect is David Reeves, has a prior kidnapping record. We've been looking for him everywhere." The next day, at the police station, I completed my official statement. The detective showed me a newspaper article about Emily's disappearance and her photo. A young woman with a radiant smile, unlike the horrified face I had seen through the window. A week later, I received a letter. Inside was a thank you card from Emily's family and a short note from Emily herself. "Frank, I don't know how to thank you enough. The doctor said if I had been there a few more days, I might not have survived. You were brave enough to stop when many others would have driven away. You saved my life. Every time I drive, I still think about that night, about the old Buick running out of gas, an incident that seemed like bad luck, but ended up saving Emily's life. Sometimes life's breakdowns lead us exactly where we need to be." My name's Ethan, 21, and I go to a community college. I babysit part-time, mostly in the evenings, so parents can take a break or go out for a bit. The job's pretty easy: keep the kids safe, play with them, and make sure they're asleep before mom and dad get back. But that night at the Coles place, things didn't go as planned. The Cole house was in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Colorado, a typical two-story place with a pitched roof, red brick walls, and a big yard full of flowers. Inside, it was neat, pretty simple, but still cozy. The living room was lit up by a small chandelier hanging from the ceiling, and the walls had a few hand-drawn pictures, probably Lucas's, the 7-year-old I'm watching. Lucas had autism. He was a quiet kid, usually caught up in his own little world instead of chatting with people. I always tried to make sure he's comfortable, like he was understood. That night, Lucas was on the floor, completely focused on his Lego blocks, carefully putting each piece together. I sat on the couch watching, throwing in a few words here and there to encourage him. Around 10, I told him it was bedtime. He didn't argue, just packed up his toys and headed upstairs on his own, his blue striped nightgown swishing behind him. I followed, switched on the room light, helped him get his bed ready, and said goodnight. Lucas's room was big but simple. His single bed was pushed up against the wall with a big white wooden wardrobe next to it. The soft glow from his moon-shaped nightlight made the room feel warm and safe. I headed back to the living room, grabbed the book sitting on the table, and flipped it open. Around midnight, a sound snapped me out of my focus. A tiny voice, almost a whisper, drifted down from upstairs. I set the book down and headed up, my footsteps making the wooden stairs creak. Lucas's door was slightly open, the soft glow of his nightlight spilling into the hallway. I nudged the door open and stepped inside. He was sitting on his bed, staring straight at the wardrobe. "Lucas, you're still up?" I kept my voice low, but I couldn't hide my curiosity. He didn't respond. His eyes stayed locked on the wardrobe, and his small hands tapped rhythmically on the bed, something I'd seen him do plenty of times before. "What are you doing?" Lucas turned his head just a little, his big round eyes glinting in the dim light.
"I'm imitating my friend,"
he whispered. My heart skipped a beat. When I asked about his friend, Lucas pointed straight at the closet. I glanced over, but nothing seemed off. The closet door was shut, its smooth surface catching the dim light from the room. I walked over and rested a hand on his shoulder. "You should get some sleep. Your friend's probably tired too." Lucas nodded slowly, then lay down. I pulled the blanket over him, switched off the light, and quietly shut the door behind me. Back in the living room, I tried to pick up where I left off in my book, but my mind just wouldn't focus. A weird feeling crept over me, like someone was watching from behind. Then it happened again, that strange rattling sound coming from Lucas's room. I jumped up and rushed upstairs, heart hammering in my chest. Lucas's door was still slightly open. I pushed it wider and stopped. Lucas was sound asleep, curled up under his blanket, face peaceful, breathing slow and steady. But the wardrobe door was open. A faint flickering light glowed from inside, even though I was sure I'd turned off every light in the room. My pulse pounded in my ears. My hand shook as I reached out and touched the cold wooden door. I pulled the door open, and a soft green glow slowly emerged. Between the neatly hung clothes, the light flickered weakly, casting eerie shadows. I crouched down and reached for it, an old doll, its paint chipped, its LED eyes flickering weakly in the dark. I shivered a little, trying to shake it off. That had to be the weird light I saw earlier. I turned around fast and the doll blurted out,
"Hello?"
its voice all scratchy and worn, just like it looked. I froze. For a few seconds, I swear the air got colder, like a draft was sneaking in from somewhere. I set the doll on the shelf, shut the closet door, and headed back to the living room. Tried to brush it off, but I couldn't. The whole night, I kept jumping at every little sound, this uneasy feeling creeping over me, as something I didn't know where it came from and what it was. The next morning, when Lucas's parents got home, I gave them a quick rundown of his day, left out the part about his friend and the whole closet thing. There was something in Lucas's eyes, this mix of innocence and something else, something almost secret. I had no idea where to even start. Before heading out, I walked over to Lucas, trying to keep my smile as natural as possible. "Sleep okay last night?" Lucas nodded, his big blue eyes locked on me.
Yeah, but my friend didn't.
I hesitated. Who's that?
He likes the wardrobe. He only comes out after you go to bed. I don't think he likes you.
Lucas said it so casually, like it was just another random fact. I had no idea how to respond. I just gave him a quick pat on the head and headed for the door. The morning sunlight felt good on my skin, but that uneasy feeling still clung to me. As I walked past Lucas's window, I glanced back without thinking. The wardrobe door was shut, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was still inside. Back home, I tossed my coat on the table and figured I'd make myself a coffee. But before I could take a step, I heard it. A small noise. That same faint rattling. I turned around. My bag sat on the chair, zipper halfway open. Inside was the doll. How the hell did it get there? Had Lucas slipped it in when I wasn't looking? I glanced around, that weird feeling creeping up again, like someone was watching me. Maybe I was just imagining things, or maybe Lucas's friend had decided to stick around.
I'm Cain, 32 years old, have been married for 5 years, and I have a 3-year-old son. My small family lives in a peaceful neighborhood, in a well-appointed house that my spouse and I have worked hard for over the years. The area we live in still has quite a few houses that are unoccupied. One weekend, after returning from the supermarket, my wife announced some news with a tone of anticipation and excitement. We're going to have new neighbors soon. I saw 2 large moving trucks parked in the house across the street since early this morning. I wasn't as excited as my wife. For me, having neighbors or not makes no difference. I'm an introvert and don't enjoy socializing or meeting new people. By bedtime, I still saw the 2 trucks parked outside, and what was strange was that there were no homeowners in sight, only the movers still working. Do you think they have young children? My wife stood behind me, looking at the house across the street and whispered. I looked at her and then at the house, remaining silent. I hope so. That way our Roger will have someone to play with. The next morning I went downstairs, after getting ready. My wife was in the kitchen making breakfast, and our son was sitting very quietly at the dining table. The 3 of us started a new day happily, with cheerful laughter. Cain, what do you think about inviting our new neighbors over for dinner? Dinner? But we don't know anything about them yet. I met Brenna, the owner of the house, this morning, and she's very friendly. My wife was very excited about having new neighbors. She suggested the dishes she would prepare for dinner. She even imagined what the future would be like with our 2 families being close. I definitely didn't like this at all. Not because I'm worried about the food or anything else. It's just that sitting down to eat and talk with a stranger is really difficult for me. Alright then, later, you'll go over to the neighbor's house to introduce yourself and invite them, okay? My wife is always like that, making decisions without considering how I feel. I kept delaying the introduction until that afternoon. By the time my wife was about to lose her patience, I finally got up from my seat and went over to the neighbor's house. After knocking twice, a woman whom I guessed was Brenna opened the door and greeted me very warmly. Hello, my spouse and I just moved in. Is there something you need? I'm Cain. I live in the house across the street. Oh, so you're Aurora's husband. Nice to meet you. I could sense that Brenna shared some of my wife's traits, cheerful and friendly. But it also took quite a while for me to make the invitation. My family would like to prepare dinner at our house so that we can get to know each other better. Sure, my spouse and I will come. How about this Friday evening? For me, any day works. I agreed with Brenna. Before leaving, I took a brief glance inside their house, just by accident. On the sofa, there was a man reading a magazine, probably the husband Brenna mentioned. I found something very strange about him, and also about Brenna. I'm not sure what it was. Finally, the Friday I was dreading arrived. My wife prepared a sumptuous meal and got formal outfits ready for our son and me to welcome the guests. At exactly 6 p.m., Brenna and her husband arrived, bringing along a small dog, a bottle of wine, and some cold cuts. Hello, this is Dominic, my husband, and this is Hack. It's great to have your family over for dinner. Brenna greeted us cheerfully while Dominic was quite indifferent. He's probably an introvert like me, but with an added touch of aloofness. The dinner unfolded with two contrasting states. My wife and Brenna chatted and laughed happily, while Dominic and I focused on eating in silence. I also tried to strike up a conversation with him a few times, but all I received in response were cold, sharp glances. He wasn't inclined to chat, but also didn't take his gaze off me. After about 30 minutes of the meal, which felt like 3 hours to me, I was on the verge of freezing up from discomfort. It didn't end there. After the meal, we sat on the sofa to have dessert. My wife proudly mentioned that she had researched and made the pumpkin pie recipe herself, and Brenna was very impressed. I'm impressed with the meat, Dominic said. His gaze was still fixed on me. He's complimenting your cooking skills, Aurora, Brenna said. The two women returned to the kitchen to share cooking tips with each other, leaving me feeling awkward and tense, my whole body stiffening. I didn't dare look at Dominic anymore, so I turned to pet Hack and play with my son. The sound of Dominic placing his plate on the table indicated that he had finished his dessert. Out of courtesy, I hesitantly asked him if he would like some more pie or tea. I'm curious. I wonder what your meat will taste like, Dominic said. My body was enveloped in a sense of shock and fear. Seeing Dominic's insinuating smile, I stood up angrily and shouted at him, "Are you out of your mind?" My wife and Brenna rushed over, anxiously asking what had happened. I felt like my limits were being tested as the neighbor continued to stare at me with an amused smile. I clenched my fists in anger, unsure whether he didn't understand or was intentionally pretending not to. Brenna and my wife seemed like the spokespeople for both of them. The two women kept apologizing and thanking each other. Brenna hugged Hack and then led her husband back home. After they left, I still couldn't calm down. My emotions were very chaotic and uncomfortable. My wife is waiting for me to calm down before asking about everything clearly. Of course, my wife will believe what I say. She reacted with surprise to anger. At this moment, I am the one calming and advising my wife to stay calm. My wife and I didn't manage to sleep until 2 a.m. The next morning, my wife still got up very early. I went downstairs and was surprised to see my wife's rather uncomfortable and angry state. She was heading towards the front door. I watched my wife and was alarmed to realize that she was heading towards the neighbor's house across the street. Brenna was also at the door, and the two of them were talking about something. I hurried over to my wife and grabbed her hand. Your husband's words yesterday made us a bit concerned. He was probably just joking, right? No, he wasn't joking, Brenna said with a knowing smile. Her words left my wife and me speechless. We will enjoy each member of your family in turn, starting with him, then you, and also My wife angrily shouted at Brenna, stopping the disgusting line of thought and the mention of our son's name coming from her mouth. My wife and I seriously urged Brenna's family to stop this cruel joke and leave. We closed the door, but Brenna still stood there, looking at us and smiling. After that morning conversation with Brenna, my wife and I felt even more tense. Although it was just words, their attitude and the look in their eyes made us think a lot. I suggested to my wife that we buy a gun for self-defense, just in case. My wife immediately objected, saying I was overreacting. She also pointed out that having a gun in the house is dangerous, especially with our young son around. That night, worried about my state of mind, my wife handed me a pill along with a glass of water. "It's just a sedative, don't overthink things." I listened to her, took the pill, and fell asleep without even realizing it. The sound of the phone ringing startled me awake. It was nearly 1 a.m. at the time. I quickly silenced the phone and answered the call. "Hello, may I ask who is calling at this hour?" The response I received was silence. I informed them that I would hang up, and then I heard a faint sound. At first, it sounded like a clicking noise. Then it was the sound of saliva, and then I was stunned to realize it was the sound of chewing, like the sound of an animal devouring its prey. "I'm very curious about your taste." My whole body was numb, as if an electric current was flowing through it. I lost my composure and was about to shout loudly, but seeing that my wife was still sound asleep, I restrained myself. Carrying the laptop to the living room, I tried every possible way to look up information about the phone number owner. But there were no results. I stayed up until morning, and my wife, when she went looking for me and found me in such a fatigued state, was very worried. I told her about my intention to move to a different place. "No, don't you remember how hard we worked to get this house?" My wife decided to call the police. My family will continue to stay here. That afternoon, my wife and I went to the police station to report the incident. Contrary to our anxiety, the officer handling the case was very casual. "Mason Davis." I looked at the nameplate on his chest and muttered, "Oh, calm down, Mr. and Mrs. Moore. It's just a joke from the new neighbors." But we insisted that it wasn't a joke. Our family did not perceive any goodwill from those neighbors. Moreover, our son is very young and needs to be protected. "A joke that involves children is unacceptable, officer," I countered with a firm attitude. "Listen, have you ever met a cute little kid and joked about wanting to pinch or bite them? Is such a joke as threatening and serious as what Mr. and Mrs. Moore are describing?" Seeing his attitude left us both stunned and outraged. Another officer present handled everything for us. He told us to go home first, and that the police would go talk to those neighbors. But it wasn't until the afternoon of the next day that the police car with 2 officers arrived at our neighbor's house. It was still Brenna who opened the door with a cheerful and friendly attitude, with no trace of surprise on her face. My wife and I watched from inside the house. After a couple of exchanges, Brenna's attitude remained very cheerful, and the male officers was the same. They nodded to each other, and then the 2 officers left without any report or further action. They didn't get into the police car, but instead walked toward my house with this serious demeanor. That was Officer Mason Davis. I remembered his face and name. "Mr. Moore, I'm sorry to have to issue a first warning to your family. The Brenna and Dominic family across the street has accused you of knocking on their door and harassing them first." I lost my composure, explained to the officer in a very heated manner, and even wanted to go to the neighbor's house to clarify the issue. My wife quickly stopped me. The outburst would only prove that I was indeed the one causing a commotion and harassing their family. The police left, and I stood at the door watching them with a sense of helplessness. Accidentally glancing over at the neighbor's house, Dominic stood at the door, smiling at me and even licking his lips. I went inside, trying to calm my breathing and regain my composure. The next morning I went out early and didn't return until after lunch. "Where have you been all morning?" my wife complained, concerned. "I went to get this." I pulled my wife into the kitchen to avoid our son and presented a gun in front of her. My wife was extremely surprised and somewhat upset for not having discussed it with her in detail. "I'll only use it in dangerous situations for self-defense. I will protect you and our child." I felt quite relieved after legally registering to own a gun. That night, I could sleep peacefully, knowing that the gun was under my pillow. In the middle of the night, a clattering noise outside woke me up. I didn't react immediately, but stayed in place to listen further, and the noise happened again. I got out of bed, approached the window, and looked outside. A shadow was moving in the backyard. Immediately, I reached under the pillow to grab the gun and ran out of the room. "What's going on, Cain?" My wife's voice was still groggy. "Call the police right away, Aurora. Go to Roger's room and stay there with him. Remember." I went outside despite my wife calling after me and crying. I turned on all the lights around the house in the backyard while walking around to check. A plate was placed on the ground near the door with something on top. I approached. It was a piece of meat still stained with bright red blood and a note. "I will definitely enjoy you." I angrily kicked the plate, shouted loudly, and fired 3 shots into the sky. "Get out of here, you bastard! I know you're still here, Dominic!" The sound of the police siren grew louder, and I became more confident. With a weapon for defense in my hand and standing in my own house, it'll be enough reason to accuse that neighbor. An officer approached me with a very calm demeanor, while the other one searched around the house. "It's Officer Mason Davis again. Is he the only cop in this whole city? You are using a weapon without proper legal documentation." I'm confident in saying that I have all the necessary legal documents and am ready to show them if he wants. "The provider of the gun and the legal documentation for you is not sufficiently reliable, Mr. Moore. We will confiscate this gun, along with the related documents." I'm not cooperating, that's for sure. "How do you know I have a gun? How do you know the address I registered for its use? What is the basis for you to say that the place is not legally compliant?" I asked a series of questions that made Officer Mason uncomfortable. I provided the piece of meat along with the note. This will be the most convincing evidence for everything I reported. "It's very possible that this is someone else's meat, isn't it?" I emphasized my suspicion. "We will confiscate it and take it for testing." The police left, and my family fell into confusion and fear once again. I thought everything would become clear and resolved, but it only got worse. My small family is being threatened by strangers, weirdos, and possibly even malicious perverts. It has been a week since that terrifying night. It feels like a whole year has passed. My family's life has become darker and more suffocating than ever before. Feeling unsafe, my wife has taken a temporary leave from work, and our son has also stopped attending school. My job can be done online, so the family's finances are still being maintained. There are no more unusual occurrences, but the joy and freedom are gone. We constantly feel anxious and unsettled in our own home. Seeing my son and wife visibly losing weight, I feel deeply distressed. The more I get angry, the more I want to solve everything. An afternoon while sitting and working by the window, a habit has formed. I regularly observe my neighbors and their every action. Every day, like clockwork, a delivery person arrives at their house, and the recipient is always Brenna. I'm not sure what they do for work, but I've never seen them leave the house for too long. In the evening, a rather luxurious car parked in front of the neighbor's house. The two men get out of the car. Immediately, I recognize Officer Mason Davis and the other person whom I haven't met before. The two men are dressed casually, chatting and laughing and carrying a box. They knock on the door and are invited inside by Brenna. So, it seems they know each other. Officer Mason and Brenna's family, Dominic. From the start, all my accusations were just meaningless ramblings because Dominic will be innocent by any means. I took photos of everything I witnessed in case they might be needed later. It wasn't until late the next evening that Officer Mason left Brenna and Dominic's house. He left alone, without the other man, still in a very cheerful state, just like the day before. I didn't say anything to my wife about what I had observed. I want my wife and son to have a more relaxed and lighthearted state of mind. My wife can't keep taking time off from work, and Roger's leave from school has expired. Life needs to return to normal. I decided to drop off and pick up my wife and son every day to ensure their absolute safety. On the third day, after Officer Mason left the neighbor's house, the stranger still hadn't appeared. I began to speculate about the worst possible scenario for that man. He might have been dismembered and digested. What should I do? Report it to the police? But I'll have to deal with that strange and secretive Officer Mason again. And who would believe me? They might think I'm just harassing the neighbors, suffering from paranoia, or even being crazy. I started investigating information about Officer Mason. Surprisingly, he has a less than favorable past. Abuse, theft, and even sexual assault. How could he have even joined the police force? Researching Dominic, there is quite limited information about him, but it's enough to shock me. Dominic Miller, born August 13, 1983. Former police chief dismissed due to ethical misconduct scandal. I gradually started to understand some information about the relationship between Mason and Dominic. The next day, an envelope from the Forensic Institute arrived at our house. It's the results of the test on the meat from that night. My phone suddenly rang. Mr. Moore, this is Officer Mason. Have you received the test results? We have a copy here as well. Please review the results and call me back so we can discuss the best course of action. Officer Mason hung up with a very annoying, mocking tone. Both my wife and I had been eagerly anticipating these results. But when we actually had it in our hands, it was really difficult for my wife and me to face. The test results just lay on the table for nearly a whole day. That evening, when we went to our room, we decided to open it and see the results. The results showed that it was pork. My wife breathed a sigh of relief, thanking God that we could start over with a normal life. But I wasn't relieved, because I knew more. All of this wasn't as simple as it seemed. After much contemplation, I decided to persuade my wife to leave. I accept that I may be seen as a coward, but my wife and son are far more important than anything else. I don't want my family's life to have any further involvement with those frightening people. No one can help my family right now, not even the police. Roger and our future children need a better environment to grow up in. No, Cain, I don't want it like this, my wife cried, feeling helpless and desperate. I embraced my wife and son. After quickly packing up for 3 days, we drove away in the night. We will find a way to deal with that house. It's still a valuable asset. We moved to a different, unfamiliar town, into a smaller house, but one that felt warm and comfortable. I continued with my work. My wife found a new job with better pay, and Roger gradually adjusted to his new school. 3 months later, I watched the news and learned that Brenna had passed away. The news reported that Dominic had brutally murdered his wife in the bedroom. Dominic was taken to the police station in a state of uncontrollable madness. According to the doctor's report, Dominic had contracted a parasitic infection from eating raw meat for an extended period. Police also discovered a large amount of unidentified meat packed into 2 refrigerators in Dominic and Brenna's kitchen. The meat samples were sent for testing to determine exactly which animal they came from. Besides Dominic, the hospital also admitted another rabies case in a critical condition, that is Officer Mason. There was no news about the stranger who had come to Dominic's house that night. Indeed, it seems that their family had a preference for eating raw meat. And as for where that meat came from, only I and the 2 people suffering from rabies know for sure. I'm David. 7 years ago, I finished my studies at Stanford University, California. I'm stressed thinking about what job I will do and which city to choose to live in. My parents are elderly. They live on pensions in their hometown of Montana. In a few days, I will move out of the school dormitory. I constantly searched for information about cheap apartments on student groups and found a place about 8 kilometers from my dormitory. It is a fairly small 2-story house, including 2 bedrooms on the 2nd floor, living room, and kitchen on the 1st floor. This house is being rented by Kevin, 25 years old. He wants to find a roommate and reduce costs because Kevin has a fairly low income as a cashier at a convenience store. When I moved in, I was very surprised with the space and interior of the house. Everything is complete and comfortable. Really great compared to the amount of money we rented. When I asked about the landlord, Kevin said he would come check the house quarterly. The rental contract Kevin had already prepared and just needed to sign it. Kevin is a quiet but kind person. Kevin helped me arrange things in the room and told me to let him know if I needed anything. The next days I sent my resumes everywhere looking for a job. One evening, I stayed up late to talk to my friends about work and upcoming plans. When I accidentally turned around, I was startled and almost dropped the phone when I saw Kevin standing at the door, looking at me with wide eyes. "I've been looking for my phone all night," Kevin answered me in an emotionless whisper. Looking down, I told Kevin in surprise that the phone was in his hand. Kevin slowly looked down at the phone in his hand, then without saying anything more, left for his room. He must be sleepwalking, I think. Another night I was half awake and half dreaming, feeling that the bed was more uneven today. When I moved, I felt like someone was lying next to me. I woke up and saw Kevin lying next to me, in a neat position, his hands on his stomach, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. I jumped up and screamed loudly. I got angry and asked Kevin why he was here. He maintained his lying position, slowly turning his head to look at me. "I'm so scared. It keeps clinging on to me. It wants to eat me." I sighed at the thought of Kevin sleepwalking again and pulled him back to his room and quickly went back to sleep because I had an interview tomorrow. The next morning I returned home at 11 a.m. after the interview. Hearing a shaky mumbly coming from upstairs, I ran up and saw Kevin sitting huddled in front of the door. Now that I look closely, Kevin is much thinner. His face is haggard and his eyes blackened. Kevin kept muttering incomprehensible things about death. I asked worriedly, but he didn't seem to hear anything. His mouth mumbled faster, his face showing fear and panic. I went to help Kevin up, but he reacted very strongly and pushed my hand away. He said he was out of breath and thirsty. I quickly ran to pour water, but when I returned, Kevin was gone. Pushing open Kevin's room door, I saw him lying on the bed, covered with a blanket. I put the glass of water on the bedside table and went out. Did he go through something terrible? A week later, I was accepted and had a job that matched my qualifications. One late afternoon after coming home from work, I was startled to see a strange man about 60 years old in the house. He was tall and thin, with many strange tattoos on his arms. I was quite impressed with his beard and long hair tied back. It turned out he was the owner of this house. He said he came to inspect the house and end the lease with Kevin. I was very surprised, so Kevin left without saying anything to me. The landlord told me to find more roommates to reduce costs because maybe in the next few months he will increase the rent a bit. The homeowner moved away and I was still thinking about Kevin. He left without taking anything with him, which was strange. About a week later, I was busy with a new job. The post looking for a roommate also received a lot of attention, but I haven't been able to reply to all of them. One night I came home early after 3 consecutive days of overtime. Lying in bed answering messages from a few people interested in the house, I fell asleep without realizing it. I met Kevin, still with the same haggard face, eyes wide open in panic, whispering voice echoing hauntingly.
Hold. There's a rope around my neck. There are too many people here. They all look at me with scary eyes.
Suddenly, Kevin let out a loud, shrill, and a painful scream. I jumped up, looked around the room in fear, then quickly reached out and turned on the light. Looking at the clock, it was just after 9 p.m. I calmed down and went down to the kitchen to pour myself a drink. I can't get out of my head thinking about Kevin. I searched every corner of the house with the thinking that this house must have some secret. I don't understand why I did that at that time. As if someone had instructed me, I suddenly remembered Kevin's bedroom. Unexpectedly, my guess was correct. Behind Kevin's bed, there was a door leading down to a place like the basement. I don't know if Kevin had discovered it yet. 40% of me right now is fear. The remaining 60% is curiosity. Holding the baseball bat from Kevin's room, I slowly walked down. I saw the dim light, reached the end of the stairs, and the scene around the basement made me dumbfounded. Many human skeletons and bodies that had not yet fully decomposed were tied tightly to the 4 walls. In the middle of the room was Kevin's body, tied to a wooden post, his face filled with pain and panic. Kevin's neck was tied tightly with a blank stone string, and a talisman was pinned straight to his chest. On the wall behind me were photos of many people. They were all young men. I saw Kevin's photo on it, and in the last photo, pasted in the red circle, is me.
I am Evelyn, 32 years old. A light drizzle was falling on the quiet streets of Portland, streaking water down the car windows. I pulled up my coat collar and hurried toward the office building. April was colder than usual this year, and the gloomy sky made it feel like something was off. The office was buzzing with laughter this morning. Everyone was pulling pranks on each other. Someone had stuck a note on my computer screen. Password changed. Good luck. I didn't even react. April Fools had never really been my thing. A big yellow envelope showed up on my desk, no name on it, but it definitely caught my attention. I opened it. Inside was a plain white sheet of paper with just one sentence. The game has just begun. I glanced around the office, confused. No one even looked my way, like they were all waiting for me to do something. I brushed it off, figuring it was just someone's dumb prank. That night, when I got home, there was a small black gift box sitting right by my door with a crimson ribbon. I picked it up, and a shiver ran down my spine. When I opened it, there was another piece of paper inside. Happy April Fools. I shivered again, and as soon as I folded the paper, I noticed a small photo at the bottom of the box. It was a picture of me from that morning, right after I stepped out of the coffee shop near my office. It was taken from a distance, but it was pretty clear someone had been following me. I carried this weird mix of confusion and discomfort, thinking the whole thing was just some creepy April Fool's joke. That night, a soft scratching sound outside my bedroom window jolted me awake. I sat up, heart racing, telling myself I was just imagining things, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. The next day, I left the office earlier than usual, just wanting to get home and take a break. As soon as I walked into the house and shut the door, there was a knock. I hesitated for a few seconds before opening it, and there was a big box sitting on the ground. Right away, this strong, nasty smell hit me, making me want to puke before I even opened the box. My heart was pounding. I kinda knew what I was imagining, but my curiosity wouldn't let me stop. My hands were shaking as I peeled off the tape, and the second the lid popped open, I instinctively stepped back. Inside was a pile of red, slimy flesh wrapped in some cloth. Pale white patches of skin were mixed with this gross, sticky liquid. Flies buzzed around the edges, and tiny maggots crawled all over the surface. My stomach turned, and I bolted to the bathroom to throw up everything. It took me forever to calm down, but I went back to the box. I had to get rid of that disgusting thing immediately. But then I stopped. There was a small piece of paper on the box, covered in dried blood. Remember me? I didn't remember. My mind was a total mess, completely confused. But someone out there remembered me, clear as day. The cops showed up 10 minutes later. They checked the box, took meat samples for investigation, and searched around the house. 2 days later, the cops found out the meat in the box was bought from a local slaughterhouse. Looking at the cloth that wrapped the meat, it looked a lot like a jacket I used to have. My head was spinning, and I felt like I was losing it from this creepy prank. He had been so close to me. He snuck into my house, and there was a good chance he was still out there somewhere without me even knowing. "Have you had any recent disagreements?" a cop asked me. My mind was all over the place as I tried to dig through my memories. A few faces popped up. A former coworker who had acted out and was pretty hostile toward me before getting fired. Some weird guy I always saw at the coffee shop near my office. Every time I went, he'd be sitting in the corner like he was watching me. Who could be behind this messed up prank? The cops started investigating based on the list of suspects I gave them. They checked the security cameras near the coffee shop and saw that the weird guy had been there a bunch of times when I was there, but there was no proof he ever approached me. When they looked into him, he turned out to be just a regular delivery guy with no criminal record and no connection to what happened. Next up was my ex-coworker who got fired, Mark. After digging into his past, the cops found out he had a record for harassing women. During the interrogation, Mark didn't deny hating me after getting fired, but swore he never planned any revenge. The cops checked Mark's recent calls and activity, but found nothing linking him to what was happening to me. That made them start thinking maybe someone else was behind all this, someone with deeper, more dangerous motives. A week later, I was living with constant anxiety. One afternoon, I got a package in the mail, a USB. I plugged it into my laptop, and there it was, a video of me sleeping, with the camera slowly getting closer and closer. The steady breathing of whoever was holding the camera started blending with the sound of my own breathing while I slept. With every passing second, my body froze up more and more. At the end of the video, the camera turned toward the window, showing the reflection of a tall, familiar figure dressed in black. I held my breath, my hands shaking as I slammed my laptop shut. But before I could even process what was happening, my phone started ringing. It was an unknown number. I hesitated for a few seconds before picking up. "Hey honey, fun little joke, huh?" His voice was deep, filled with amusement. My hand clenched around the phone. I thought of him, but there was no way. He was still supposed to be in jail. Dominic, how is this even possible? The law only traps the weak. I'm back, and I've got all the time in the world to play with you. Hearing that cold, twisted laugh made every scar on my body sting. All those memories of my personal hell came rushing back. My baby with him ripped away from me by violence just before his due date. I took a deep breath, forcing down the panic rising in my chest. I had to keep him talking long enough. I swallowed hard, my eyes flicking to the corner of my laptop screen, the location tracking system the cops installed 2 days ago. The GPS was updating every second. He was so close. My hand shook as I tapped the table, a signal to the tracking team. Dominic's creepy voice echoed in my ear. The back window. I've been in there so many times. You have no idea. My heart nearly stopped. I didn't dare turn around. I could feel his eyes on me from somewhere in the darkness. I took a deep breath. The SWAT team was in position. Dominic, this is the last time. Happy April. Fools, I whispered. A loud bang came from the other end of the line, followed by shouting, the sound of a door being kicked down, and Dominic's panicked screams when he realized he was trapped. I hung up. The location screen flashed one last time before the signal went dead. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. This time, he wasn't coming back.
My husband is Satan. I'm Cecilia. I'm 38 years old. 5 years ago, I had a happy family that others dreamed of having. Steve was my husband, and we were born in the same year. We married each other in our 33. I dedicated my youth, energy, and passion to my career. Fortunately, I finally achieved my goal. My husband also had his own profession. After marriage, due to my age, we decided to have a baby right away. But unluckily, my pregnancy was tough. We visited the hospital many times for checkups and advice from doctors. My hope was decreasing time to time. But Steve never gave up. He was always by my side. He was my source of love and positive energy. Money wasn't an issue, so we were willing to do whatever it took to have our baby. Once, after a follow-up visit at the hospital, I met a nurse named Charity in the hospital lobby. Knowing my situation, she asked a lot. She gave me a small black statue the size of 3 fingers with a strange shape. Charity told me to put the statue under the bed to get pregnant as desired. I didn't believe in spirituality, but Charity convinced me with her sincerity. I didn't talk to Steve about this. After getting home, I put the statue under the bed, as Charity told me to do. Miraculously, I was pregnant 2 months later. Steve and I were overjoyed. The feeling of carrying a baby in my body was incredible. I had a healthy and smooth pregnancy, and then my family happily welcomed a baby boy who we named Richard. Unlike the pregnancy process, I felt exhausted and stressed after giving birth. Every time I touched Richard, he would cry, making me extremely helpless. Steve took me to a psychiatrist when noticing my health and mental condition alarming. After seeing a doctor and taking prescriptions, I felt much better. My son and I could interact and get closer. One day, I woke up and went out of bed. I stepped on something that hurt my feet. Upon closer inspection, I was startled to realize that the statue was the one Charity had given me nearly a year ago. I put the statue in a box and left it in the corner of the bookshelf. So, a series of inexplicable things happened to me that drained my mind and energy. One day I was in the kitchen preparing food with the maid. Through the baby monitor, I heard Richard crying in the room. Rushing to my son, I was surprised to discover that there was a black statue in his crib. The material resembled the old one I put away, but the shape was somewhat different. This statue had sharp horns, falling wings, and an extremely angry face. I was a little frightened. I picked Richard up and ran downstairs with the statue to ask the maid why it was placed in Richard's crib. But as soon as she saw the statue in my hand, the maid was terrified. She asked for leave and ran out of the house immediately without taking her belongings. I stood there, staring blankly with Richard in my hand. I went online to research the statue and got to know that this was Satan, a demon representing all the sins of the world. That night, I woke up and checked Richard on the monitor. I vaguely saw a tall, dark shadow standing right next to my son's crib. I got up and ran to his room in Steve's confusion. There was no one standing next to the crib. Richard was still sleeping soundly. Steve took me back to my room. He believed I was just confused because I'd been tired for days. He looked after our son, and I rested. Another morning, I went down to the basement to find some kitchen utensils. The light was out, so I had to use my phone's flashlight. I was freaked out when I saw scratch marks on the wall, like something out of a horror movie. The ventilation pipes were ripped, like something had bitten them. I told Steve about it, but he just assumed the rats had destroyed it and said we would soon renovate the basement. My mental state was deteriorating, along with Richard's frequent illnesses, made Steve very worried. He asked the last psychiatrist for help, but I still didn't improve at all. Steve organized a party so I could meet and chat with friends. After dinner, we sat down and talked to each other a lot. Suddenly, my friend Lena suggested playing the Ouija board, and everyone was really interested. Is there a seventh person in this room that we don't know about? As soon as Lena's question ended, the Ouija board started moving and spelled out a sentence. "The child will be mine." I was so panicked. Steve tried to calm me down, saying it was just a game, but I didn't think so. Things started getting more and more serious, and I felt like Richard's safety was being threatened. The next morning, I went to the hospital to see Charity. I showed her the strange winged statue and told her to explain. Charity explained that this is a sacred statue that has been passed down in her family for many generations. Charity gave me a book and an ancient dagger. If you do exactly as the book tells you, the demon haunting your son will be eliminated. That night, I performed the ritual, just as in the book. After lighting the candles, I started walking around, holding the dagger and swinging it through the air. Right at the end of the ritual, I swung the knife really hard, and it went straight into Steve's shoulder. He had snuck in without me knowing. Luckily, the wound was not serious. After that incident, I stayed in a mental hospital for treatment. Steve visited many times hoping I would recover, but I was afraid I might harm him and even our son. I decided to stay in the hospital. That night, because I missed my son so much, I used my phone to look at Richard through the camera and just started bawling. Suddenly, there was this woman's voice, sounding like she was having a good time. I immediately switched to the camera in the living room. I installed that camera after seeing the shadow in Richard's room. I hadn't told Steve about this. I looked at the phone screen and was completely shocked by what I saw and heard. My husband and Charity, the nurse, were having intercourse right in my house. After that, those disgusting jerks even talked about taking my stuff. The worst part was, that bastard even planned to take my son and send him to an orphanage. So those two jerks staged the Satan statue, the ancient book, and that damn ritual. I cried all night,
My love and trust were completely shattered. The next day, I called a lawyer and gave them all the proof, accusing Steve of cheating, trying to make me look crazy, and trying to take my stuff. After a week of intense treatment, I got out of the hospital and was ready to kick Steve out of my life for good. I filed both the lawsuit and the divorce papers with the court at the same time. He told the court that his friend helped him make the Satan statue and the shadow stuff. Even that Ouija board game was part of their scheme. I became a joke to those cold-blooded people. With those charges, Steve and his mistress had to do 10 years in prison and paid me a ton of money in compensation. Richard and I are living a nice, peaceful life now. Now that Richard is 5 years old, I'm open to another relationship, as long as the person is sincere and loving, not just for me, but also for my son.
I'm Lewis, 37, working in medical aesthetics. I've got 2 spots, one in Dallas and one in Houston, Texas. So this story isn't about me. It's about a friend who works in the same field, and yeah, I kinda had a hand in that whole mess. My friend Joey, straight up the most naturally gorgeous person I've ever met. Joey's 2 years younger than me. His parents wanted him to be a lawyer, but he bailed on that and jumped into construction on his own. He's doing pretty great, making bank off big and small construction gigs. No doubt Joey's good looks have totally helped him land those deals. Construction work's tough with all the sun, wind, and dust, but it doesn't mess with Joey's looks. If anything, it makes him even tougher and more good-looking. The cash he's making isn't enough to keep up with his wild nights at bars and clubs. With his all-over-the-place attitude, Joey up and quit his construction gig again. I'm over that exhausting job. I want good money, but with less hassle and a cleaner, comfier setup. Joey asked me to teach him about the beauty biz. I'll hook you up with some courses. Joey cut me off and goes, "No need to waste time. I'll just come to your clinic to learn." After a lot of convincing, I finally agreed to let Joey start with some basic stuff. Joey's pretty sharp, so it didn't take him long to catch on and pick things up. It took Joey like 3 days to get the hang of waxing and hair removal. With his looks, Joey helped me pull in a ton more customers. "Lewis, I'm opening my own cosmetic clinic next month." Joey dropped that bomb on me, and I was totally shocked. "But you..." "Watching you work," Joey shrugged. "It's easy. Cosmetic surgery is not as hard as I thought." Even though I tried to talk him out of it, Joey's confidence just kept growing. Less than a month later, Joey's cosmetic clinic was all set up and running. Joey straight up crushed it again in the new field. Joey's making crazy money selling the whole responsibility and reputation thing in the beauty industry. But slowly, Joey's customers started complaining about the service. Joey fixed it by shutting down the shop, moving to a new spot, and pulling in a whole new crowd. With that slick business move, Joey's beauty spots just kept opening and closing, running at full speed the whole time. He just straight up bought a big villa without even thinking about it. That was the only thing left, since Joey blew all his savings on his crazy lifestyle. On top of doing unlicensed cosmetic surgery, Joey also went all in, taking on cases that needed real medical know-how. And then things got way worse than just some allergies or complications. One afternoon, I got a call from Joey. As soon as I picked up, I was freaked out by a girl's scream, like she was in pain. Lewis, what do I do about this allergy thing?" Joey yelled into the phone. Before I could even respond, the girl's moans got louder. I heard medical stuff breaking, and Joey was screaming and cursing. "Joey, what the heck did you do? What's the client's situation right now?" I gave her anesthesia. She was twitching with her mouth wide open. Oh my God, stop it!" Then the call just cut off.
I called a few more times, but Joey didn't pick up, and the same thing happened the next few days. A few days later, the news came out about a girl named Cassie going missing. The police looked into her recent stuff and found out she'd booked an appointment for black hairy tongue treatment at Joey's clinic. Feeling like something was really wrong, I called Joey right away, but he still didn't pick up. 6 days after they announced Cassie was missing, the cops found a suitcase in the basement of the villa with her body in it. The villa owner? Yup, it was Joey again. Joey sold the villa cheap because it was falling apart, all to cover his out-of-control spending. After selling the villa, Joey also hid the suitcase with Cassie's body in the basement. At the trial, he admitted guilt and said he'd been hammered on booze and drugs while treating Cassie, and that's what caused the accident. I really wish I hadn't asked for help from someone so reckless and messed up. This story is based on a real event, the tragic cosmetic accident of Maria Pilar Cruz that took place in 2003 in New York. Maria, dealing with black hairy tongue, made the mistake of choosing a cosmetic clinic instead of going to a hospital for proper treatment. Then, Maria's life came to an end at the hands of Dean Fajilo, a self-proclaimed cosmetic doctor who started out just doing basic hair removal. Dean's perfect looks and sharp mind were his weapons, helping him trick countless customers into trusting his so-called cosmetic expertise. Behind that flawless appearance was an empty soul, long corrupted by alcohol and illegal substances.
I am Adam, 32 years old. I live alone in a modest apartment in Yuma, Arizona. I work as a blog writer. The content I write usually revolves around life stories, experiences about a dish, or a travel destination. After a while of working hard, my blog has gained a lot of attention and support, but gradually, I ran out of ideas for topics and content to write about. I realized it was time for a change in both the content and the type of stories. I conducted a survey on my blog about the topics they were interested in and wanted me to write about. The majority of comments and suggestions came in for me to write short horror stories. This is truly a genre that was very new to me. I had no interest in horror, whether in fictions nor films, but to please my loyal readers, I decided to challenge myself this time. Since it was a completely new genre and not my strong suit, I spent a lot of time researching. I shifted entirely to reading horror stories and watching horror films. The initial days were quite difficult for me. When reading stories, I would remember the horror details and then imagine a dozen other tales. Each time, like so, I ended up scaring myself, feeling frightened and panicked when I was alone. The hallmark of horror films is that mysterious characters or spirits suddenly appear in hidden and dark places. I became so obsessed with this idea that I imagined an evil entity ready to pounce from any corner of the house if I wasn't cautious. Gradually, I developed a habit of scanning around whenever I entered any new space, especially dark corners. When watching horror films, I would turn on all the lights in the house, hug my pet dog, and hold the remote tightly to shut off the TV at any moment. Although I was obsessed and terrified, it was indeed a very effective way for me to approach this genre. It also brought me an abundance of inspiration. My first stories were published on the blog. The readers seemed to enjoy them, complimenting and encouraging me to continue. I gradually found myself loving this genre and wanting to gain more experience. I read more books on spirituality, thrillers, and horrifying murder cases to gather more ideas for building interesting scenarios and stories. My imagination became increasingly richer. With just one image, a tiny detail, or a leading sentence, I could make it a horror story. I even carried out challenges or spiritual games to gain real experiences and authenticity for each of my story. Gradually, my life became more and more chaotic and had my living space always carried a gloomy atmosphere. I began to view everything with a horror gaze, imagining terrifying scenarios. The friendly smile of the cashier at the supermarket, would also make me panic. And I might have seen a ghost, maybe, I wasn't sure. I first saw it when I woke up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. It appeared right behind me as I was looking in the mirror and vanished in an instant. I couldn't see its features clearly. It seemed to have no eyes, just two deep black sockets. I thought I was just scaring myself again, so I brushed it off and went back to bed. The second time was when I was awake at night reading a story. I tossed and turned in bed, reading about a lurking spirit in the narrative. Suddenly, I felt a shiver run down my spine. I swear I could feel someone's breath on the back of my neck right there. But it wasn't the warm breath of a normal person. It was an icy cold breath, causing my body to shudder in fear and cold. I took a deep breath, mentally debating with myself whether I should turn around. I tremblingly grabbed my phone and turned on the front camera. There was no one there. I sat up and looked around the room. Everything was the same. Feeling the icy atmosphere, I glanced at the air conditioner, noticing it was set to 61 degrees. I wondered if I had adjusted the temperature myself or if someone else had. Could it have been a ghost? The third time, I groggily woke up to the sound of a door opening. I saw the shadow of a tall man standing at the computer desk across from me, staring at me. My heart jumped, but when I sat up, the figure had vanished. However, when I looked toward the room door, it was indeed open. I felt confused and suspicious about everything around me, about my perceptions and senses. I took my own horrifying experiences and wrote them into a story on the blog. Everyone found it fascinating, and there was even a lively discussion in the comment section. One reader mentioned that ghosts often appear at 3 a.m. and suggested that I try some of these experiences and tell them about the authenticity of those encounters. Well, at first I was very frightened and was against the idea. I truly wanted to escape this haunting feeling, but I nonetheless skeptically followed through. The next day, I didn't sleep. Right at 3 a.m., I went on to open both windows. Outside was a dark and silent space. Suddenly, a foul odor resembling that of a corpse filled my nose, making me nauseous. But as I intended to return to bed, that stench immediately gone. Footsteps could be heard just outside the hallway, accompanied by the woeful crying of a woman. I leaned against the wall and stared at the door. The footsteps and cries disappeared after a few minutes. Afterward, I took a deep breath, calmed down, and moved toward the door. I looked through the peephole on the door. My heart raced violently against my chest. A tingling pain pierced through my chest. There was nobody outside. Since the view through the peephole was limited, I took the risk to open the door to extend my angles. I stepped outside. The long hallway was quiet and clean as it had been freshly cleaned that afternoon. Suddenly, the hallway lights flickered on and off, and the footsteps and cries of the woman emerged again. I quickly went back inside but didn't understand, then noticed that the door had closed behind me. The fingerprint recognition didn't work, and when I resorted to use the password, the incorrect password notification kept ringing. Helplessly gripped the doorknob. I shook it vigorously to no avail. I yelled out in fear and despair. A hand suddenly slammed down on my shoulder, causing me to panic even more and scream even louder. The security guard of the apartment building approaching demanded that I keep quiet. Looking around, everything had returned to normal, and with the security guard present, I felt like I had found my life back. I explained the crying of the woman, the hallway lights malfunctioning, and the apartment door being stuck. He didn't believe me and told me to try opening the door again. This time it worked as normal. The security guard threw a disgruntled look at me. I frantically apologized to him and went inside the house. Looking at the clock, it was almost 4 a.m., and although I still couldn't breathe normally after all that happened, yet I realized there was nothing too life-threatening dangerous. So I took another bold step to try yet another experience. I went into the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, so I intended to leave. Suddenly, a shadow glided in and stood right behind me. The figure slowly turned to look directly into the mirror. It was me, but without any eyes. The skin was as pale as a corpse. It opened its empty, dark mouth wide agape in a horrifying manner and lunged straight at me. I didn't have time to react. The last thing I could feel was a force impacting my head, pushing me forward. My head slammed hard against the mirror, bleeding profusely. I rushed out of the bathroom, turning on all the lights in the house. I sat in the living room, trying to open my eyes wide to remain alert. I called my best friend Otis and recounted everything. He laughed, thinking that writing horror stories had led me to hallucinate. But upon seeing my genuine distress, Otis grew concerned and agreed to stay with me for a few days. It took me nearly a week to calm down completely. Yet I couldn't explain the terrifying things I had experienced. I was also unsure about the existence of ghosts or mysterious supernatural forces. But I was sure I would never recklessly engage in those forbidden acts again. Has anyone ever had any experiences like mine? Please share your story in the comments.
I'm JC, 20 years old. I have a brother named Nathan who's 2 years older than me. We didn't get a lot of love growing up. My mom passed away early because of a serious illness, and my dad started drinking because he was so heartbroken. He was often drunk and would hit us for no reason. Nathan was pretty thin and just a bit taller than me. He was always getting picked on by his friends, and the ringleader of that annoying group was Frank. Frank was a head taller than him and almost twice as heavy. He never cried. He always stood up to the tough hits, but in the end, he still ended up losing. 10 years ago, when we were 10 and 12, the city kept reporting about kids going missing. 3 high school kids had gone missing, and they still hadn't been found. People were very scared and confused. Buses to school started coming less and less often. All our classmates had their parents pick them up and drop them off to make sure they stayed safe. Only Chris and we were left. He'd just moved into Nathan's class. Unlike Nathan, who's kind of small and frail, Chris is tall and healthy. We started getting closer over time, so we weren't as lonely, and Chris also looked out for Nathan. It's been 2 weeks since the first person went missing, and the police still hadn't found either the victim or the culprit. One day at school, Chris wasn't on the bus. I said, "Chris must not be feeling well today." But Nathan looked really worried. That day turned into a nightmare for Nathan. Since Frank hadn't seen Chris, he took it out on Nathan, hitting him as a kind of catch-up for the past few days. I rushed in to protect Nathan with all the strength I had. After that fight, we were both covered in bruises. We were still pretty happy and felt really brave. The next morning, when we got to school, we were shocked to hear that Chris was the kidnapper's next victim. I could see how worried Nathan was. He didn't talk or laugh for the next few days. Nathan went back to being bullied and just gave up. A week later, Frank was the next victim. Frank's disappearance showed just how clever the kidnapper was. Frank vanished the moment he ran to his car after school. I know it sounds bad, but I was actually relieved when Frank got kidnapped. One day I woke up from a nightmare, yelling Nathan's name and searching the whole house for him. I didn't feel relieved until I saw that Nathan was safe. I had a dream that Nathan was the next kidnapper's victim. He vanished into a bunch of black balloons right in front of the school gate. Another time, I dreamed about a guy in black holding a bunch of black balloons. He had a creepy mask on and a wicked smile. I told Nathan and my classmates about my weird dreams, and I thought they might be the kidnappers. But no one took my dreams seriously. One day, right after we finished school, 2 police showed up. They wanted to talk to me and share some info. They found the first kidnapping victim, but the boy had already passed away. The boy was holding on to bits of black rubber, which they think came from the balloons. At the spot where Frank was kidnapped, they also found several black balls stuck in the trees. The police asked me if I knew anything else about the kidnapping,
and I told them it was just random dreams. After the police left, my dad lost it and started hitting me. Nathan did his best to stop. He hugged me tight to keep me safe. After that beating, Nathan ran out of the house. I saw him quickly wipe away his tears. I tried to call Nathan and chase after him, but my dad stopped me and locked me in my room. Just like in my dream, Nathan vanished, and there were 13 black balloons hanging by the gate. I cried a lot and was really mad at my dad. I blamed him for not caring about us and wondered why we didn't get any love from him. Later, when I got older, I understood how much my dad loved my mom. I kept calling the police station to check on the status of the investigation into Nathan's whereabouts. By the end of each call, I was getting more and more frustrated. A week later, I went back to school, but I couldn't focus on anything. I was shocked to see a bunch of black balloons pinned up on the board. But within a few seconds, the teacher turned off the projector to end the class. I had a lot of questions running through my mind. Suddenly, I heard the teacher and a few friends laughing. I heard some laughter that seemed a bit familiar, but I quickly forgot about it. At night, I took my pillow into Nathan's room to sleep. I'd always ask God to protect him and bring him back home. I had another dream about that weird guy standing in front of a house with a creepy smile, holding a bunch of black balloons. 1300 Pennsylvania is the address of that house. I quickly jotted down the address, thought about it for a bit, and decided to check out that house. It was a small house on a winding road, way at the end and kind of isolated. The house was empty, and when I peeked through the window, I saw that the furniture inside was old and pretty messy. I noticed there were a ton of black balloons inside. I could hear loud rattling noises coming from the basement. I grabbed a stick lying nearby, tapped it on the windowsill, and waited nervously. I heard a faint knocking sound coming from somewhere. I was sure it was Nathan. We came up with that sound to recognize each other. I quickly searched around the house, but I was startled and screamed loudly when that strange man suddenly appeared. He laughed loudly and quickly grabbed me. I jumped up, surrounded by Nathan's room, and slapped myself in the face to make sure I wasn't dreaming. It was almost dawn, so I called the police right away. I gave them the address, described the house, and told them about the strange man from my dream. But my hopes were completely crushed when the police told me the address I gave them didn't exist. It's been 10 years, and the search for Nathan and the other victims has stopped. This year he would have been 22, graduating from college and looking forward to a bright future. Where is he? Is he living under a different name and with a new look? I never lost hope that Nathan was still out there and that he'd come back someday.
I'm Brenna, 27 years old, living in the beautiful city of Toledo, Ohio. I am confident that I have an eye-catching appearance with long black hair and a perfect figure. Even though I get a lot of attention, I haven't had a happy relationship yet. My best friend, Anna, introduced me to the blind date. That was Anna's senior at university. I was also quite comfortable with this, so I agreed. If I can't become a couple, maybe I can have another friend. The blind date took place on Friday night. He invited me to the luxurious restaurant, the Beirut. When I arrived, an extremely handsome guy sitting near the window waved at me. The closer I got, the faster my heart beat. He's actually much more handsome than in the photo. He introduced himself as Vincent, 29 years old. We started eating and chatting. Vincent is truly attractive, not only because of his appearance, but also because of his charming way of speaking and solid career. Vincent said he had a private hospital specializing in the beauty industry. I also feel that Vincent likes me quite a bit. The blind date went very happily. Vincent took me home at 11 o'clock. We exchanged contacts and set up another date. When I got back to my room, I happily picked up my phone and texted Anna about the blind date. But Anna didn't answer. I guess she was asleep. Vincent and I's next few dates were great. I accepted to be his girlfriend after the 5th date. Vincent kept complimenting my hair and hands. He said they were beautiful and made an impression from the first time he saw me. Every appointment, I texted Anna the details, but she didn't reply. I'm not worried or strange, because her job often requires her to travel and disconnect for a few days. I plan to meet Anna to thank her when she returns. One evening, after Vincent and I had finished eating, he gave me a very large and beautiful bouquet of roses. Vincent wanted to invite me to his house and said he'd prepared a surprise gift for me. I agreed without thinking too much. Vincent's house is very large and modern. He led me to a room on the 2nd floor. Vincent told me to wait here for a moment. He would come back with a surprise prepared. I hugged a bouquet of roses, feeling so lucky and happy to have found a very good boyfriend. I looked around and saw that the room was quite simple, with a lovely table and chairs, a wooden cabinet in the left corner. It would be a surprise later. I smelled an antibiotic-like smell, but with the added unpleasantness of an animal carcass. I didn't pay too much attention because those two smells were only fleeting. A few minutes later, I wanted to use the restroom. Going around the observation room, I saw the toilet in the right corner. Going inside, I saw yellow hair on the floor, sink, and bathtub. There weren't many of them, but they were still prominent enough for me to see. The hair is long. I'm sure this is a woman's hair. Maybe, in this house, there are relatives living with him. I plan to ask Vincent after he returns. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, adjusting my makeup. At the bottom of the mirror, there was a dim red light. I raised my hand to see what it was. Accidentally, I pulled up the mirror. Behind were many medical instruments. I was quite surprised, but remembering Vincent's job as a doctor, I also found the answer. I no longer wonder about the existence, but rather wonder about their location. I closed the mirror and went outside to wait for Vincent. After a while, Vincent still didn't come back. I started to lose patience. I planned to go out and look for him. The house was very large and had many rooms. I walked down the hallway and called Vincent. He didn't answer. I started to feel strange and scared. This case is very similar to the movies I've seen. I will play the main character and be in danger. While thinking about that, Vincent suddenly called out loudly, startling me. He was worried when he didn't see me in the room. Vincent gently raised his hand to his cheek and looked at me. A strange feeling appeared. He slowly closed my eyes.
I will give you long black hair like before, a lovely and soft hand. I will collect beautiful body parts that resemble you. You will be perfected soon, Natalie.
I woke up dreamily, realizing I was lying in bed, the light from the lamp shining straight into my face, making me dizzy. I just heard Vincent's voice. He mentioned something about Natalie. I heard loud, scary laughter and footsteps getting further and further away. He must have gone out. I used all my strength to sit up, trying to stay awake and observe my surroundings. I was in the room at the beginning, surrounded by a lot more medical equipment. Looking to the left, I was startled and covered my mouth with my hand to keep from screaming. It was a woman, but it wasn't right because she didn't have hands, hair, or ears. Or it's a mannequin, but the stitches to attach to the body parts are very clear. I panicked and sat close to the corner of the bed. Looking at my arms, there are many marks. My scalp was also completely numb. I trembled and got out of bed, trying to run away from here as quickly as possible. My head couldn't deduce anything about Vincent anymore. I just wanted to escape quickly, get out of this evil house and find help. While scared and confused, I accidentally bumped into the cabinet near the door. The closet door opened and 2 women fell to the floor from inside. Each of them is missing some part of their body. The fear was so extreme that I couldn't control my body anymore. I stood there looking at the two women and realized one of them is my best friend Anna. Her beautiful blue eyes were sewed shut. The stitches are infected and smell terrible. Anna was still breathing. She was still alive. I helped her up when suddenly I heard footsteps coming closer and closer from outside.
I'm Martin, 33 years old, living in Houston, USA. I have a job with a high income in exchange for a busy work schedule. I've experienced many hotels from budget to luxury, but my hotel experience during a business trip to New York 3 years ago still haunts me. I arrived at the budget hotel at 11 p.m. I didn't have much time to choose a place to stay. The receptionist told me there was only one room left in Area B. There were 2 rooms on that floor. She told me to avoid disturbing the room with the red sign S1302 next to it, because that was the place the young couple rented for a fixed period of 1 month. I was very tired after a long flight, so I didn't pay attention to that room. I had a 4-day business trip here. The first night went smoothly. I slept very well. The next day, I finished work and returned to the hotel at 8 p.m. After showering and changing into comfortable pajamas, I lay on the bed to relax. Suddenly, giggles rang out in the next room, which was the young couple's room. Then there were moans. They were probably having fun. I put on headphones, turned on the music quite loudly, and fell asleep after that. On the third night, screams and slightly crazy laughter rang out, startling me awake. Looking at the phone clock, it was 12 o'clock. I'm quite uncomfortable because work is stressful all day long, so I really need to get enough sleep. I called the front desk to complain and wanted them to remind the couple to limit such noises. I regret renting a hotel with such poor soundproofing quality. It took 10 minutes for the laughter to stop, and it took me a long time to fall asleep again. The next day I felt tired and went to meet my business partner. The last night I returned to the hotel at 10 p.m. Tomorrow morning I will go home to rest. But this last night was truly more terrible than the previous nights. Because I had drunken a lot of coffee during the day, I have difficulty sleeping. It was nearly 11 o'clock when I heard footsteps running in the hallway. Why are they still making noise when I already responded to the receptionist? I approached the door, intending to directly remind the couple because they were outside anyway. But as soon as I opened the door and walked out, a woman wearing a thin nightgown covering her feet, long black hair hanging down, eyes staring lifelessly. In her hand, she held a sharp, dirty knife straight towards me. I immediately retreated into my room and avoided it. She still maintained that position and ran past. I followed her with my eyes, even though I was very scared. She suddenly stopped, twisted her neck, and made a cracking sound and looked straight back at me. I panicked and quickly locked the door. My whole body trembled. My mind was dizzy and panicked. I was about to call the receptionist when there was a knock on my door. I felt like my heart lost a beat. It took me a few seconds to calm down, but that knocking sound continued. I held my breath, slowly turned around and looked through the peephole. What caught my eye was the image of the woman just standing and staring at the door. The creepy smile on her thin face sent chills down my spine. I didn't know what to do next. Suddenly, a man's loud, angry scream rang out. Then his arm held something and swung it strongly towards the woman. Blood caught on my door, covering the peephole, a dark red color and a fishy smell. I covered my mouth tightly, not daring to scream. I don't remember whether I walked or crawled to the hotel desk phone. I tried my best to put it into words. I asked the receptionist, the security guard, the manager, anyone to come to my room immediately. The hotel manager and staff were present, and nearby tenants ran in panic and gossip. On the floor right in front of my room,
A woman lay in a pool of blood. The receptionist confirmed that this is the wife who rented 1302. About 10 minutes later, the police arrived and sealed off the scene. The police asked the receptionist to use the spare key to open the door to room 1302. In the room, there was a horrifying scene with blood, syringes, ropes, sharp knives, and a very strong smell. Lying on the sofa was the body of a man with a long cut on his neck, still bleeding, and a knife clutched tightly in his hand. According to police investigation, the man and woman were Jax and Jesse, their husband and wife. The hotel room is a place they rented to satisfy their drug addiction. The hotel receptionist was also bribed by the couple. Days of constant drug use make them mad and lose all self-control. Jax murdered his wife, and then he went back to his room and committed suicide. I asked the hotel to move me to another room and booked my plane ticket for the earliest flight home.
I'm Dante, 46 years old. I live in Houston with my wife and 18-year-old daughter, Selena. 3 months ago, a terrible incident happened that caused us to lose our beloved Selena forever. It was a weekend evening. Around 11 p.m., I drove to pick up Selena from a birthday party. A while ago, she told me to go to Laura's birthday, Selena's best friend. I learned that Laura lives alone. That house was bought by her parents on her 18th birthday. When arriving at Laura's house, silence prevailed. I guess the party is over. I sat in the car and called Selena, but after 3 phone calls, she didn't pick up. I was worried and was about to get out of the car to ring the doorbell when Selena ran out. The girl was still wearing her party outfit, but she was wearing a baseball cap that covered her face. Selena opened the car door and sat in the back seat. I turned back to ask, but she didn't answer. I told her to get in the front seat, but Selena just sat with her head down and shook her head. The smell of alcohol was strong throughout the car. I guess she's drunk because she drank too much. I didn't say much more and started driving home. On the way home, I kept glancing through the rearview mirror in the car to see Selena's situation. While passing a Burger King store, Selena suddenly spoke. "Can I have a burger, Dad?" I was a bit surprised. She spoke with a strange voice and spoke very fast. It took me a few seconds to respond. "Okay, kiddo." I stopped the car in front of a burger store. Selena immediately opened the door and quickly rushed out of the car. I was both surprised and worried, quickly took off my seatbelt and took my phone into the store. I remember it was almost 12 o'clock at night. Entering the store, there were only a few customers and 2 male employees left. Looking at the service counter, I didn't see Selena there. I looked around the store but couldn't see her. I went to ask the store staff. He said just now a girl wearing the clothes I described came into the bathroom. Maybe she felt uncomfortable, so she wanted to use the bathroom first, I thought. I stood at the service counter ordering a cheeseburger. I know Selena's preferences very well. About 5 minutes later, the burger was being made, but Selena still hadn't appeared. I walked towards the bathroom, stood about 1 meter from the door and called out. Selena did not answer. I continued calling and lost my patience. I approached and knocked on the bathroom door. Suddenly, the door slowly opened. I was surprised to see there was no one inside. I could clearly feel the smell of alcohol still in the bathroom. I went to the service counter. She wasn't there. I grabbed the burger and ran to the car. Selena wasn't in the car either. Returning to the store, I looked around again but still couldn't find my daughter. I asked the staff. They all said they didn't see Selena.
One of the two employees there said he heard the sound of water being flushed while I was ordering a burger. I started to feel worried and really confused. Selena has never had such strange behavior. I told two male employees to let me review the images from the surveillance camera, and they happily agreed. Surveillance camera images show that Selena entered the store and headed towards the bathroom, but since then, she has not appeared again. There were the last few customers I saw at the beginning walking out of the store with a girl. I quickly picked up the phone to call Selena, but she left the phone in the car. I called my wife. She said the girl wasn't home yet. By this time, I was really worried and insecure. Everything happened so quickly and inexplicably that I had no time to react. I returned home and told my wife the whole thing. My wife quickly called the police. That whole night, my husband and I didn't sleep. We consoled each other that Selena was just drunk and fell asleep somewhere. Early the next morning, my husband and I went to Laura's house. Laura said the last time she saw Selena was when I picked her up. Laura was very worried. She said she would contact a few other friends to look for Selena and my husband and I. I announced the bad news to Merlin, which was that her boyfriend was 3 years older than Selena, but he didn't have any worries when he found out. Just like that, my daughter mysteriously disappeared. The police are still actively searching. It's been nearly 3 months and my husband and I never lost hope of finding Selena. I always prayed to God for her safety, but he did not hear my prayers. One morning, the local news channel reported a horrific case. At the young girl's house, they found the body of a man who had been strangled to the point of suffocation. He had bruises all over his body and had many needle punctures. Not only that, the police also discovered the decomposing body of a girl hidden in the attic. The police discovered that the young girl's house contained a lot of drugs and other illegal substances under the bed. My wife and I were dumbfounded. That killer girl was Laura. The man's body was Merlin, my daughter's boyfriend. My wife burst into tears. She looked at me in pain but couldn't say a word. I understood what my wife meant. I was frightened by my speculations in my head. I contacted the police in charge of Selena's disappearance. After investigation, they determined that the decomposing body of the girl in Laura's house was Selena, my daughter. Police said Laura admitted that she and Merlin had been secretly going back and forth behind Selena's back. That birthday party, they had a terrible argument. After all the guests left, Laura, Merlin, and Selena remained to resolve the conflict. In anger, Selena was strangled by Merlin. Laura witnessed my daughter gradually lose her life, but was very happy. They became a couple, often going to Laura's house to have fun and use drugs. In a drunken stupor, Laura strangled Merlin while he slept, and then used a needle to stab Merlin's body multiple times. So the person I picked up that night was Laura. She disguised herself as Selena and created a mysterious disappearance. Why don't I recognize my own daughter?
I'm Lisa, living alone in a comfortable apartment in Seattle, Washington, USA. One week, I signed up to work overtime at the company until late at night. I remember it was Tuesday. I lazily left the office at nearly 10 p.m. When we got down to the parking garage, the air was cold and gloomy, with only a few cars parked overnight. I approached my parking spot, panicked when I saw the car had a black skull painted on it. I went home, frustration lingering within me all night. The next morning, I asked the security guard to review the security camera in the parking garage. I want to know the bastard who did the trick. But the camera quality was very low. Only seeing a black shadow, I parked the car in quite a dark location. I had to swallow my anger and let him go. That evening, I still got off work late like the day before. Learning from experience, this time I parked the car near the camera. I carefully went around to check, seeing that the car was still intact. I felt secure in opening the door and sitting in. Suddenly, there were clicking sounds followed by savage laughter. It echoed in the quiet night space of the car tunnel. Startled, I grabbed the steering wheel tightly. A few seconds later, the laughter stopped, and I took a moment to calm down. Even though I'm a woman, I'm a rather brave one, and I don't believe in ghost stories. Slowly opening the door and getting out of the car, I looked around. The clicking sound rang out again. I concentrated on listening, slowly sat down and looked under the car. What caught my eye was that wrinkled face, that creepy smile, and that savage laugh. I pulled out a devil toy. It was probably made on Halloween. "Who the hell is doing this?" I muttered angrily. I walked around the parking area but couldn't find the vandal. That silly thing took me a lot of time. It was already 12 o'clock when I got home. The next morning, I went to work late feeling tired and lethargic. My close colleague Evelyn asked me worriedly, "Are you okay, Lisa? Don't work too hard." Receiving a cup of coffee from Evelyn makes me feel more comfortable. Talking a little about Evelyn, she is Asian American. I love her beauty. "Don't tell me you're still working overtime tonight, right?" Evelyn asked. I smiled and nodded. She looked surprised and helpless, then left to go back to work. By 8 p.m. that night, I was exhausted. My mind couldn't work anymore. I decided to go home and rest early. Going down to the basement, heading towards the parking lot, I heard someone mumbling. The closer I got to where I parked, the clearer the whisper became. I could hear the content of what that person said were scary curses. Walking faster, my heart pounded when I realized there was a figure standing next to my car. I ran over, but that person noticed and immediately ran away. He ran so fast I couldn't keep up and lost track of him. Returning to the parking lot, I was startled to discover a strange object. It was a small piece of yellow paper. Drawn on it were very strange characters. I guess they were charms. I've heard of witchcraft, but it's not really popular in America. I was so shocked. I couldn't believe I would fall into this terrible situation. On the drive home, I kept thinking about the talisman. I asked myself a lot of questions about myself and my relationships. That night was truly terrifying for me. I was half awake and half dreaming, always feeling like someone was lying next to me. A cold hand was placed on my arm. I was fully aware and felt but unable to react. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. That cold hand gradually touched my neck and squeezed hard. I widened my eyes in fear, my body still stiff even though I tried to struggle. The hand squeezed even tighter. My neck hurt. I sat up, opened my mouth wide, and inhaled as much as I could. I'm using 2 hands, squeezing my neck tightly. I fell into a daze and sat like that all night. It wasn't until the next afternoon that I arrived at the company. I wore a silk scarf to cover the bruises on my neck. Looking around, I couldn't see Evelyn. I asked my colleagues. They said she had a serious car accident last night. The garage guard said that she panicked and ran away quickly out of the parking garage, and at that moment, a car came. During that afternoon, I thought a lot about Evelyn. Now that I'm married, my husband is the one who helped me get through that difficult period. I am working as a department head and continuously succeed with large projects. As for Evelyn, she has been in a vegetative state for the past 5 years. I still keep the video recorded by the hidden camera I placed in the car. The images of Evelyn with an evil look in her eyes that I had never seen before.
There's a group of high school friends. After graduating 10 years ago, they set up a hangout to dig up the time capsule they buried behind the school. The first one to show up at the meeting spot was Rich, who's now killing it with a bunch of restaurants in the busy city. After about 10 minutes, Adam, the vet, finally shows up. The 2 buddies are stoked to see each other and jump right into asking about life and work. The third person shows up after 15 minutes. Rose, a gorgeous model. "You still can't shake that habit of being late, huh, Rose?" Rich jokes with her. "It's a Maserati.
Your ride is awesome, Rich, Rose says, switching things up. Rich and Adam get it and laugh happily. Let's roll, Rich says excitedly after the two friends get comfy in the car. Where's Frank? He's still MIA, Rose shouted. Let's chill and wait for him a bit longer, Adam says. Frank? Who's that? It's just the three of us, Rich says, totally confused. Rose laughs and says, You're pulling my leg again, Rich. Seriously, guys, I don't know any Frank. Can someone break it down for me? Rich says with a pretty serious look. He was in our crew, just a tight group of 4, Rich. He was even special to you, Rose says while checking out Rich's face. Then she and Adam share a confused look. Rich zones out, his brain firing on all cylinders, but he still can't remember who Frank is. I don't even have the slightest clue who that is. Rose and Adam are shocked and just stand there for a few seconds. It's all good, you'll remember when he shows up, Adam says, forcing a smile. The vibe in the car gets super quiet and awkward. Almost 30 minutes go by. It is nearly noon, and Frank still isn't here. Rich is starting to lose his cool. Does anyone have Frank's number? Call him and tell him to hurry up. You got it, Adam? Rose asks quietly, turning to him. Adam shakes his head, giving her an unsure look. Are we actually waiting for another person, or are you guys just messing with me? Rich says, a bit annoyed. Let's grab some food first. I'm kinda hungry. How about you, Adam? Oh, I want to grab something to eat too. So the three friends hit up the closest restaurant and have a great lunch. By the afternoon, Frank still hasn't shown up, and Rich totally loses his patience, so he just drives off from the meeting spot. They drive back to the high school together, and it takes about 40 minutes. When they get to the school, they don't rush to dig up the box. Instead, they stroll around. The group of friends snap some old school pics, and the joy of reliving their youth has all three of them hugging it out. When they finally get to the main stuff, they can't remember exactly where they buried the box, so they end up searching for an hour. Finally, after 10 years of hiding it, they find the treasure, and it is almost dark out. The group use their phone flashlights to light it up and start checking out each keepsake. First up are the drawings and test papers with an F on them. Notably, besides the keepsakes with the 3 of their names, there is always a 4th one with Frank's name on it. Rose and Adam laugh happily, while Rich looks confused and a bit suspicious, like he is starting to remember something. At the bottom of the box are 4 letters they wrote to themselves 10 years later. Rose opens Frank's letter and reads it aloud. Hey, my friends. It's awesome you guys show up. I don't feel lonely anymore. You guys are gonna stick with me forever. Rose's voice gets quieter and shaky, and Adam and Rich look confused too. There's still something down there, Adam says, pointing down and whispering. Rich quickly digs through a thin layer of dirt, and the top half, the skull, pops up. Rich doesn't stop and just kept digging like crazy. Meanwhile, Rose and Adam cling to each other and back away from the hole. The top half of the skeleton has a red shirt with the name Frank stitched on it. Rose and Adam freak out and bolt. Rich is still sitting there, just staring at the skeleton. He remembers that 10 years ago, Rich actually killed Frank with a pen just over some random jokes. While Rich was totally freaking out and trying to bury his crime, Adam and Rose just happened to bring the time capsule. On the empty road near the school, while Adam is calling the cops, Rose is freaking out, crying and gasping for breath. The blinding headlights and the roar of the Maserati's engine are speeding straight toward Adam and Rose.
I am Mia, 31 years old, and I work as a manager at Rudy's Country in Austin. I just moved to a new place to make it more convenient for commuting to work. Everything here would be perfect if it weren't for the eccentric neighbor across from my house. My job allows me to have plenty of free time every morning. Therefore, I usually start my day with a cup of tea and watch the news. The Austin City Police Department has reported the disappearance of a young woman named Gail Morgan, 29 years old. Disappearances always target women and children, those with weaker ability to resist. I muttered to myself, simultaneously considering the idea of applying for a permit to own a gun for self-defense. Seeing the image of the young woman on the news was really pitiful. It seemed like I had seen her somewhere before. It was just a fleeting thought, and I quickly got ready to go to work. The workday was busy since it was the weekend, but the image of the missing girl kept lingering in my mind. Driving home from work at 10 p.m., I accidentally saw my neighbor dragging a cart full of cardboard boxes. I politely greeted him, but all I received in response was an indifferent and emotionless attitude. After a whole day of work until late, I didn't feel tired at all, but just a brief encounter with the neighbor left me feeling frustrated. I told myself I wouldn't bother paying any attention to that eccentric guy anymore. But things didn't simply just end there. I took a shower, changed clothes, and lay down on the bed to relax around midnight. As I was about to drift off to sleep, a noise from an object I couldn't identify woke me up. I sat up, looking toward the window with annoyance and irritation. It seemed to be coming from the neighbor's house, and it sounded like a chainsaw. I got out of bed and walked over to open the window. It was definitely coming from his house, as the lights inside were still on. As I was thinking about how to respond to the noise, it suddenly stopped. But I was already wide awake and tossed and turned until nearly 2 a.m. In the following days, I was busy with work, so I only spent about 6 to 7 hours at home each day. Finally, there came a day when I could relax and rest. I slept straight through until 2 p.m., woke up, had a light salad, and planned to go back to bed. But the sound of arguing from the neighbor's house caught my attention. In front of the neighbor's house across the street, 2 women from the neighboring houses were showing clear signs of frustration. I could faintly hear the argument, which seemed to be about the neighbor refusing to clean his house, causing garbage smells to affect the 2 families next door. The neighbor threw them hostile glares, his mouth constantly muttering to himself. "I'll clean up this afternoon," he said, then stormed inside and slammed the door shut. I sighed in frustration and went back inside. Thankfully, the unpleasant smell hadn't reached my house yet. By evening, I saw that neighbor drive back in this small pickup truck with something large and heavy in the back, like a wardrobe. At that moment, I wondered what kind of noise the night would bring. But after that day, there were no more noises or complaints about the unpleasant smell coming from the neighbor's house. I thought maybe things would settle down as long as I didn't pay any more attention to that guy. But fate had one final encounter in store for me with him. One that would leave me with an obsession I couldn't escape. Once again, I saw the news report about the mysterious disappearance of Gail Morgan. In that moment, I jumped up, my gaze instantly turning toward the neighbor's house. That's right, it was her, the girl who had lived at his house for a while. I had seen her a few times, but just only briefly. Chainsaw, the smell, the wardrobe. I pieced everything together and suddenly shuddered. I rushed to lock all the doors in the house, called the police, and chose to remain anonymous. About 20 minutes after the police arrived, he was handcuffed, escorted to the car, and another SWAT team arrived to search the house. I couldn't see what happened inside. The next day, following the news, the police announced that they had found Gail, but she was not intact. She had been hidden in the fridge and freezer in the neighbor's house. The reasons behind the neighbor's brutal actions and his criminal mindset were beyond the explanation of any expert. I didn't go home for a week after that, and chose to stay at a hotel because of the haunting fear. I couldn't bear the thought of living across from the home of a cold-blooded, sick murderer. The story above is based on a real event that occurred on May 22nd, 2019. The Michigan police in the United States received a tip-off call. The caller concealed their identity and provided the police with a single address, telling them that they would find Kelly Jean Warner, the woman who had been missing for weeks, at that location. At that moment, no one could have imagined that the phone call would lead them to uncover a truly horrific case, one that would haunt many of the American police officers involved. The perpetrator was the victim's boyfriend. He imprisoned her and used all kinds of brutal torture to make his girlfriend lose her basic human physiology and have to rely entirely on him. Finally, he murdered and dismembered the unfortunate girl into many pieces and hid them in the house, living as if nothing had happened. The killer was considered one of the most cruel and perverse criminals in U.S. history. Arizona in late fall's got this wild, indescribable beauty. The air's crisp, with that earthy, dry grass smell riding the breeze that slips through the truck window. I just wrapped up a long delivery haul from Texas. The highway stretched out forever, with low bushes lining both sides. I was driving in silence, just the steady hum of the engine keeping me company. The headlights cut through the dark, and then a small figure standing by the side of the road. I frowned, tapped the brakes, and eased off the gas. It was a young girl, one hand raised to wave me down, the other clutching an oversized hoodie flapping in the wind. Her hair was a mess, a few strands stuck to her pale cheeks. I glanced around, looking for a broken-down car or maybe some bags, but there was nothing, just her, alone, out here in the middle of nowhere, like she just stepped out of thin air. I stopped the car, not even sure why. Maybe it was the emptiness of the long drive, or maybe it was the look in her eyes, like she'd given up on everything. The door creaked as I opened it. "Get in." I gave a nod toward the passenger seat. She slid in, dipped her head in a silent thanks, but didn't say a word. The cabin light hit her face, deep-set eyes with dark circles, like she hadn't slept in forever. She tugged at her sleeves, pulling them over her hands. That hoodie was worn, some faint stains, a couple of tears, and this faint kind of burnt smell. The air inside got thick, heavy, almost suffocating. I stole a glance at her. She just stared out the window, still and tense, like she was trying to escape something out there. The radio hummed softly in the background. I reached over and shut it off. That soft sound didn't fit with the vibe in the car right then. As I rounded a small pass, headlights from an oncoming car lit up the cabin. The girl shifted, leaning away like she didn't want anyone to see her face. I frowned but kept quiet, just pressed the gas a little harder to get through the stretch. Every time headlights flashed in, she'd flinch and edge toward the door, her hand tightening around the handle without even realizing it. After a while, she tugged her hoodie up, trying to cover her neck and arms. The cabin light caught the edge of a scar running from her wrist, disappearing under the sleeve. She noticed me noticing. Her eyes darted my way, guarded, cautious. I tapped the brakes to dodge a pothole, and that's when I heard it, a sharp hiss of pain. She was trembling, like she was bracing for something awful. That weird, uneasy feeling crept up my spine. Why did she look like that? The way she acted had my mind spinning with questions. The sky was pitch black when those red and blue lights lit up behind me. A police car. Its lights spun like crazy in the night. I checked the rearview mirror, and that uneasy feeling hit me like a punch to the gut. The girl sat up, breathing fast, her fingers gripping the armrest so hard her knuckles went white. I glanced over. She didn't say a word, just stared straight ahead, eyes wide with panic. Then she gave this tiny shake of her head, like she was begging me not to stop. The truck slowed down anyway. I couldn't help it. I stopped, even though every part of me didn't want to. When the truck came to a full stop, She yanked her hands inside her sleeves and ducked her face under the hoodie. I heard her whispering something under her breath. It sounded like a prayer. A cop stepped up, flashlight in hand, beam cutting straight into the cabin. The light froze on the girl's face. "Natalie!" His voice was sharp. "We've been looking for you all day." That name hit like a gavel slamming down. Natalie flinched, turning away, shoulders hunched like she was trying to disappear. Then she snapped, pulled up her sleeves, showing me the mess of scars crisscrossing her arms, faint burns mixed in. "No, I don't want to go with them." Her voice broke, barely a whisper. "Please." The cop didn't react, not a flicker of emotion. He yanked open the door, grabbed her arm, and pulled her out. She fought, twisting, kicking, but it didn't matter. Right before they dragged her off, Natalie turned and looked at me. Those eyes, they weren't just looking. They were trying to burn something into my brain. They didn't come to help me. They're gonna kill me. Her voice hung in the air, cold and sharp. It made me shiver. The police car rolled away, red and blue lights spinning into the darkness until it disappeared. I sat there for a second, staring at the empty seat beside me. That's when I saw it. A crumpled scrap of paper on the floor. The handwriting was shaky, rushed. "They're not real police." My chest tightened, and then it hit me. The car didn't have a license plate. The emblem on the door looked off, and that cop's eyes, cold, empty, that smug, fake smile. Nothing about him felt like a cop. I gripped the piece of paper tight, my whole body tense. My brain whispered one thing: just drive. Forget it. Get out of here. But Natalie's eyes, the scars on her hands, and those shaky, scribbled words wouldn't let me walk away. "Damn it," I muttered, gripping the steering wheel so hard. I slammed my foot on the gas and took off, trying to catch up with that so-called police car. But it was like they vanished into thin air, just gone, swallowed by the night. I drove in circles for what felt like forever, searching, but it was useless. Eventually, exhaustion won. I gave up, ended up at the nearest police station, telling them everything I'd seen, hoping someone could make sense of it all. After that night, life slipped back into the usual grind, long hauls, endless roads. But Natalie, she wouldn't leave my mind. The look in her eyes, the way she shook gripping that armrest, the scars crisscrossing her wrists, it all stuck with me, like a mark I couldn't erase. I kept wondering what happened to her after they took her. Who was she really? Was she some innocent victim? Or were those scars just the surface of a story way darker than I realized? 2 weeks later, I took another delivery that sent me down the same stretch of road. That afternoon, the sky was heavy with thick gray clouds, and the wind kicked up swirls of dust along the highway. As my truck hit the stretch where I'd seen Natalie, something yanked at my gut, and I slammed the brakes hard. On the side of the road, hanging from a low tree branch, was a gray hoodie. The exact same one she wore that night. The neck was ripped, the stains still there. I stepped out of the truck, heart racing, a cold chill crawling up my spine. Everything around me was dead silent. I looked around, searching for any sign that someone had put it there. But there was nothing. Just the empty road and a few scattered bushes. The hoodie swayed softly in the wind, a quiet, ghostly reminder of that night. And every time I drive through some empty stretch of road, I see her eyes. That last desperate pleading look before she vanished. Months have passed. The police didn't find a thing. Out on those endless roads, I always wonder, if I'd done something differently, would I know the truth? Would it have changed her fate?